The howling wind carried Catherine Andrews through the darkness like a ghost fleeing death itself, her horse stumbling beneath her as snow turned the Wyoming landscape into a white nightmare. She had been riding for hours since leaving Fort Laramie, desperate to reach her sister in Cheyenne before the storm hit. But nature had other plans, and now the blizzard wrapped around her like frozen chains threatening to drag her into an early grave. The mare beneath her finally gave up, dropping to her front knees with a desperate whinny that tore at Catherine's heart, even as panic seized her chest. She slid from the saddle, her skirts heavy with ice, her fingers numb inside her gloves, squinting through the swirling snow for any sign of shelter, any hope of survival. Through the white curtain she saw it, a dim orange glow that might have been her imagination, but she stumbled toward it anyway because what choice did she have? Her legs barely worked, each step a battle against the wind that wanted to knock her down and bury her where she fell. The glow grew brighter, and she realized it was a window, a small cabin emerging from the storm like salvation itself. She reached the door and pounded on it with what little strength remained in her frozen hands, not caring who might be inside because freezing to death seemed worse than any danger a stranger might pose. The door opened, and warmth hit her face along with the smell of coffee and wood smoke. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the firelight behind him. He took one look at her and moved aside without hesitation. "Get in here before you become a snowdrift." Catherine stumbled inside, and the man shut the door against the howling wind, cutting off the storm's terrible voice. She stood there dripping melting snow onto his floor, shaking so hard her teeth chattered, unable to form words. He was already moving, grabbing a blanket from the bed in the corner and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Can you walk?" His voice was deep, rough but not unkind. She nodded, and he guided her to a chair near the fireplace, the only chair she noticed. The cabin was small, barely more than one room with a bed, a table, a few shelves, and the fireplace that currently felt like heaven itself. "My horse," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "Outside," she collapsed. The man was already pulling on his coat, a heavy bearskin that made his large frame even more imposing. "I will get her into the lean-to with mine. You stay by that fire and do not move." He disappeared into the storm before Catherine could thank him. She huddled in the chair, holding her frozen hands toward the flames, wincing as feeling started to return in painful tingles. She looked around the cabin with growing awareness. Everything was neat and well-maintained despite the rough bachelor quality. A rifle hung above the door, saddle gear in one corner, shelves with tin plates and cups, a coffee pot on the hearth. The bed looked warm and inviting with thick blankets and furs. The door opened again, bringing a blast of cold and snow before the man pushed it shut. He was covered in white, ice clinging to his dark beard, but he moved with efficient calm as he shed the coat and hung it on a peg. Now Catherine could see him properly in the firelight. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a few years older, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met his collar and gray eyes that studied her with concern. His face was weathered but handsome, the kind of face that came from years of hard work outdoors. "Your mare is sheltered and rubbed down," he said, moving to the fire to warm his own hands. "She is favoring her front right leg, but I do not think anything is broken, just worn out and cold like her rider." "Thank you," Catherine said, and her voice broke on the words. The reality of how close she had come to dying hit her all at once. "I thought I could make it to Cheyenne before the storm. I was so stupid. Not stupid, unlucky with timing." He moved to his small stove and poured coffee into a tin cup, then brought it to her. "Drink this. When did you last eat?" Catherine wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. This morning, before I left Fort Laramie, the man made a disapproving sound and went to his shelves, pulling down supplies. You rode all day in this weather with no food. You are fortunate to be alive. I know. Catherine sipped the coffee, strong and bitter and wonderful. She watched him work, setting a pan on the stove, cutting salt pork and adding it to beans he pulled from a pot. His movements were practiced and sure. "What is your name? I should know who saved my life." "Owen Thorne." He glanced at her over his shoulder. "This is my winter range cabin. I run cattle for the Diamond T Ranch out of Paso Robles, but we move the herd to winter grazing up here. I check on them every few days." Paso Robles. That is in California, is it not? Catherine was confused. There is a small settlement in Wyoming called Paso Robles too. Started by some folks from California about 5 years back, near Cheyenne. He stirred the beans. "Where were you headed exactly?" "My sister lives in Cheyenne. Margaret Anderson. Her husband runs the general store there. She is expecting her first baby and I wanted to be with her." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Now she will worry. I told her I would arrive today." "This storm will last through tomorrow at least," Owen said, his tone matter of fact. "No one is going anywhere. But your sister will know you had sense enough to find shelter. Anyone with family traveling worries during storms like this, but they also know the traveler found a safe place to wait it out." His calm certainty helped settle Catherine's nerves. She drank more coffee and studied him as he prepared food. There was something solid and dependable about Owen Thorne, something that made her feel safe despite being alone with a strange man miles from anywhere. She realized she was improper even being here, but propriety seemed less important than survival. "Tell me about yourself," Owen said as he worked. Beyond having a sister in Cheyenne and poor timing with weather, Catherine smiled despite everything. "I am Catherine Andrews. I have been teaching school in Fort Laramie for 2 years. Before that, I lived in Philadelphia with my parents, but they both died of fever and there was nothing left for me there. Margaret had already married and moved west, so I followed. Teaching school." Owen nodded, bringing 2 plates of food to the table. "That explains the good diction. Come eat while it is hot." Catherine rose on unsteady legs and joined him at the table. The food was simple but well prepared, and she discovered she was ravenous. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen spoke again. "You came west alone. That took courage, or desperation." Catherine met his eyes. "Though I have not regretted it. Fort Laramie is rough, but the children need education, and I feel useful there. What about you? How did you end up ranching in Wyoming?" Owen leaned back, coffee cup in hand. "I grew up in Kansas, worked cattle drives to earn money, and eventually got hired on at Diamond T 3 years ago. It is good work, honest work. The owner treats his men fairly. In a few more years, I hope to have enough saved to start my own small ranch." "That is a good dream." Catherine found herself relaxing despite the awkwardness of the situation. Owen was easy to talk to, his manner straightforward without being crude. She was acutely aware that they were alone, that night was falling, that she had nowhere else to go. As if reading her thoughts, Owen stood and began clearing the plates. "You will take the bed tonight. I will make a bedroll by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Catherine protested. "You have already done so much. You nearly froze to death and you are exhausted. The bed is yours." His tone allowed no argument. "I have slept by many fires. It is no hardship." Catherine wanted to protest further, but the truth was she could barely keep her eyes open. The warmth, the food, and the safety after so much fear had drained away her last reserves of energy. "Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay your kindness." "No repayment needed." Owen was already pulling blankets from a chest, making a pallet on the floor near the hearth. "Get some sleep, Miss Andrews. Tomorrow we wait out the storm." Catherine moved to the bed, her legs heavy. She sat on the edge and unlaced her boots with clumsy fingers. Her dress was still damp, but there was nothing to be done about that. She would have to sleep in her undergarments and hope her dress dried by morning. She glanced at Owen, but he had his back turned, giving her privacy as he arranged his bedding. She quickly changed out of the damp dress down to her chemise and drawers, then climbed under the blankets and furs. The bed smelled of wood smoke and something masculine but clean. She turned to face the fire and saw Owen settling into his makeshift bed, fully clothed except for his boots. "Good night, Mr. Thorne," she said softly. "Good night, Miss Andrews. Sleep well." Catherine closed her eyes, and despite everything, the strangeness of her situation and the storm raging outside, she felt safe. Owen Thorne was a good man. She could sense it in the way he had not hesitated to help her, in his respectful manner, in the way he gave up his bed without making her feel like she owed him anything in return. She drifted off to sleep, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl, warm and safe when she should have been dead in the snow. Catherine woke to pale gray light filtering through the cabin's single window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment she was disoriented, not recognizing where she was, then memory flooded back. The storm, the cabin, Owen Thorne. She sat up and saw the man himself standing at the stove, his back to her as he prepared breakfast. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Owen turned and something flickered in his eyes as he looked at her, something that made Catherine suddenly aware she was sitting in his bed wearing only her undergarments. She pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, face flushing. "Good morning," Owen said, his voice carefully neutral. He turned back to the stove. "Your dress is dry. I hung it by the fire last night." Catherine saw her dress draped over the back of the chair. "Thank you." She waited, but Owen kept his back turned, giving her privacy to dress. She climbed out of bed and quickly pulled on the dress, fingers fumbling with buttons and laces. When she was decent, she said, "I am dressed now." Owen turned and held out a cup of coffee. "The storm is still going strong. We are not going anywhere today." Catherine took the coffee and moved to the window. Snow fell so thick she could barely see 3 feet beyond the glass. The wind rattled the shutters and whistled through tiny cracks. "I have never seen snow like this. Wyoming winters are harsh." Owen brought plates of fried bread and bacon to the table. "But this cabin has weathered worse. We have plenty of food and firewood. We just have to wait it out." They ate breakfast, and Catherine found herself stealing glances at Owen when he was not looking. In the gray morning light, she could see details she had missed last night. The way his hair curled at his temples, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the strength in his hands. He was a handsome man, she realized, though his face had the weathered quality of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. "You mind if I ask how old you are?" Catherine said, then immediately felt foolish. "I am sorry, that was rude." Owen smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. "Not rude. I am 32. What about you?" 23. Catherine felt the 6 years of age difference settle between them, not uncomfortable but present. "I suppose you think I am very young. I think you are brave enough to teach school on the frontier and sensible enough to seek shelter in a storm." Owen met her eyes across the table. "Age is less important than character." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. They finished breakfast, and Owen insisted on cleaning up while Catherine explored the small cabin. There was not much to see, but she found herself drawn to the few personal items Owen had. A photograph on the shelf showed a stern-looking couple, probably his parents. A book sat on the small table by the bed, a worn copy of Stories by Washington Irving. "You read?" she asked, picking up the book. "When I have light and time." Owen was wiping down the table. "Not much formal education, but I taught myself well enough. That book has seen me through many lonely nights." Catherine felt a pang of sympathy. "It must be isolating, spending so much time alone out here." Owen shrugged. "I like solitude. Most people talk too much and say too little." Then he glanced at her with a hint of that smile again. Present company excluded. They spent the morning in easy conversation. Owen wanted to know about teaching, about the children in Fort Laramie, about life in Philadelphia before Catherine came west. She found herself telling him things she had not talked about in years, about her parents' death, about feeling adrift and purposeless until she found teaching. Owen listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, never dismissing her experiences. In turn, Catherine learned about Owen's life. He had left home at 16 after his father died, worked cattle drives up from Texas, spent time in Colorado and Montana before settling in Wyoming. He had seen men killed, had nearly died himself once from a horse fall, had lived through droughts and harsh winters and all the dangers of frontier life. Yet he spoke of it matter-of-factly, without bravado or complaint. "You ever want more than ranching?" Catherine asked as they sat by the fire after lunch, the storm still raging outside. Owen was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "Sometimes I think about having my own place, not just working for someone else, but building something that is mine. A small ranch, maybe a wife and family someday." He glanced at her. "Simple dreams for a simple man, not simple, important." Catherine felt her heart beat faster. "Everyone deserves a home and family if they want it. What about you? Do you plan to teach school forever?" Catherine considered the question. "I suppose I always thought I would marry eventually, but there are not many suitable men in Fort Laramie. Most are soldiers or rough types passing through. I will not marry just for the sake of being married." "Good." Owen's voice was firm. "You should not settle for less than you deserve." Their eyes met and held. Catherine felt something shift in the air between them, something electric and terrifying and wonderful. She looked away first, her cheeks warming. This was ridiculous. She had known this man less than a day. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the sense that she had found something rare and valuable. The afternoon passed in comfortable companionship. Owen taught Catherine how to play cards, and she beat him 3 times at poker, which made him laugh, a wonderful sound that filled the small cabin with warmth. They talked and fell into easy silences, cooked together, and Catherine felt more at home in this rough cabin than she had felt anywhere since leaving Philadelphia. As evening fell and Owen prepared dinner, Catherine found herself watching him move around the cabin. He was graceful for such a large man, economical in his movements. She imagined him working cattle, riding across open ranges, and something in her chest ached with longing for a life she had never considered before. "You are quiet," Owen said, glancing at her as he stirred a pot of stew. "Just thinking." Catherine wrapped her arms around herself. "This is probably improper, me being here alone with you, probably." Owen did not seem concerned. "But staying alive is more important than propriety. Anyone with sense would understand that. Society is not always sensible." "No." Owen brought bowls to the table. "But society is not here, just you and me and the storm outside." They ate and talked more, trading stories and opinions. Catherine found Owen's views on the world refreshing. He had strong principles but an open mind, judged people by their actions rather than their origins, and had a dry wit that caught her by surprise and made her laugh. After dinner, They sat by the fire, and Owen read aloud from his book of Irving stories. Catherine closed her eyes and listened to his deep voice bringing the words to life, losing herself in tales of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her. "You have a wonderful reading voice," she said softly. "Years of talking to cattle." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "They are a captive audience," Catherine laughed. Then the laughter faded as they looked at each other. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. The cabin felt like its own world, separate from everything else. "Catherine," Owen said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. "I know this situation is strange, but I want you to know I will never do anything to harm you or make you uncomfortable. You are safe here. I know." And she did know deep in her bones. "I trust you, Owen." Something sparked in his eyes at her use of his name. They sat in charged silence for a long moment before Owen stood abruptly. "You should take the bed again. I will bank the fire." Catherine wanted to protest, but she was tired and there was nowhere else to sleep. She prepared for bed while Owen gave her privacy, and once again she climbed under the blankets and furs, watching him settle into his bedroll by the fire. "Owen," she said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything." "You are welcome, Catherine. Sleep well." But Catherine lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and thinking about the man sleeping by the fire. She had been so focused on survival, on getting to her sister, that she had not expected to find anything else. Yet here in this remote cabin she had found something precious. Someone who made her laugh and think and feel alive in ways she had not felt since before her parents died. She drifted to sleep with Owen's name on her lips and dreams of gray eyes that saw right through her defenses. The third day of the storm dawned and Catherine woke to find Owen already up, looking out the window with a frown. She rose and joined him, now comfortable enough to appear in her nightclothes with just a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Still snowing?" she asked. "Yes, but lighter." "The wind has died down." Owen glanced at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Probably another day before it is safe to travel." Oh, Catherine did not know if she was disappointed or relieved. Another day trapped in close quarters with Owen Thorne, another day of this growing tension between them. They fell into the routine of the past days. Breakfast, conversation, small chores around the cabin. But today felt different. Catherine caught Owen watching her when he thought she was not looking. She found herself hyper-aware of every movement he made, every time they accidentally touched while working in the small space. By afternoon, the tension was thick enough to cut. They sat by the fire pretending to be comfortable, but the air hummed with everything unsaid. Finally, Owen stood abruptly and moved to the window, staring out at the falling snow. "Catherine." His voice was rough. "I need to say something, and I need you to listen before you respond." Catherine's heart hammered. "All right." Owen turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know we have only known each other 3 days. I know this situation is unusual and you might think I am taking advantage. But I have to be honest, because if I do not say this now, I will regret it for the rest of my life." He crossed the cabin and knelt in front of her chair so they were eye to eye. Catherine stopped breathing. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met," Owen said, his gray eyes intense. "You are smart and brave and kind. You make me laugh. You make this cabin feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. And I know it is too fast. I know you have a life in Fort Laramie and plans to see your sister, but I have to tell you that I am falling in love with you." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. Tears sprang to her eyes. "Owen, you do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I do not expect you to feel the same way, but when this storm ends and you leave, I need you to know that these 3 days have meant everything to me." That you mean everything to me." Catherine reached out with shaking hands and cupped his face. "You foolish man. Did you not see that I have been falling in love with you too?" Owen's expression transformed from anguish to hopeful to joyful in the space of a heartbeat. "Truly, truly." Catherine laughed through her tears. "I thought I was going mad feeling so much so fast. But Owen, I have never felt this way about anyone. You make me feel safe and seen and valued. You make me want things I had given up hoping for." Owen surged forward and kissed her. Catherine melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as his hands came up to cradle her face. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened with all the passion they had been holding back for 3 days. Catherine had been kissed before, but never like this, never with this sense of rightness and coming home. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this properly. I want to court you, marry you if you will have me. I know I do not have much, but I will work hard and build you a good life." "I do not need much." Catherine's hands tangled in his hair. "I just need you." They kissed again, and the world narrowed to just the two of them, the fire's warmth, the feeling of finally finding where they belonged. When they separated, Owen stood and pulled Catherine to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. "Tell me about your dreams," he said softly. "Tell me everything you want in life." Catherine leaned into his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. "I want a home. Not fancy, but warm and full of love. I want children someday, a family. I want a partner who respects me and treats me as an equal. I want to wake up every day next to someone who makes me laugh. I can give you all of that." Owen's voice was fierce with promise. "I swear to you, Catherine, I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. And I will do the same for you." Catherine pulled back to look up at him. "But we need to be practical. I have obligations in Fort Laramie. My contract runs until the end of the school term in May. And my sister needs me, I know." Owen smoothed her hair back from her face. "We will figure it out. After the storm, you will go to your sister. I will return to Paso Robles, but I will court you properly. I will write to you, visit when I can. And when your contract ends, if you still want me, we will marry and build our life together." Catherine smiled. "I will still want you. I will want you every day for the rest of my life." They spent the rest of the day wrapped in each other, talking and kissing and making plans. Owen told her about the piece of land he had his eye on, 160 acres with good water and grazing. Catherine described the kind of house she dreamed of, simple but sturdy with room for children and maybe a garden. They talked about the future as if it was certain, as if 3 days had been enough to know they were meant for each other. That night Catherine did not sleep in the bed and Owen by the fire. They lay together in the bed, fully clothed and proper but wrapped in each other's arms. Owen held her close and Catherine pressed her face into his chest, breathing in the scent of him, memorizing the feel of his solid warmth. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you," Owen replied, his lips against her hair. "Thank you for getting caught in my storm." Catherine laughed softly. "Thank you for being here to save me." They fell asleep tangled together, and Catherine had never felt more safe or more certain that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning the storm had finally ended. Catherine woke to bright sunshine streaming through the window and the terrible knowledge that she would have to leave soon. Owen was already up, preparing breakfast, and when she joined him at the table his expression was both happy and sad. "The snow has stopped," he said unnecessarily. "Yes." Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. "But this is not goodbye forever." "No." Owen squeezed her fingers. "Just goodbye for now." They ate slowly, neither wanting to acknowledge the approaching separation. After breakfast, Owen went to check on the horses while Catherine tidied the cabin, already missing it. This small, rough place had become precious to her, the site where her whole life had changed. When Owen returned, he helped Catherine bundle up in her now dry traveling clothes. "The snow is deep but passable if we go slow. I will ride with you to Cheyenne and make sure you arrive safely." "You do not have to do that," Catherine protested, even as relief flooded through her. "I know I do not have to, I want to." Owen cupped her face. "I need to know you are safe with your sister before I can ride away." They prepared the horses and set out into a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and pristine, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. The cold was bitter, but the wind had died and the sun felt warm on Catherine's face. Owen rode beside her, keeping a careful eye on the trail, and Catherine drank in the sight of him on horseback, at home in the saddle and the landscape. The ride to Cheyenne took most of the day through the deep snow. They talked when the trail allowed them to ride side by side, fell into comfortable silence when they had to ride single file. Catherine memorized everything about this day, knowing it would have to sustain her through the long weeks apart. As they crested a hill and saw Cheyenne spread out below, a growing town in the valley, Catherine felt her throat tighten. She did not want to arrive. She wanted to turn around and ride back to the cabin and hide from the world. Owen must have sensed her thoughts because he reached over and took her hand. "We will be together again soon, I promise." They rode into Cheyenne as the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. Owen asked directions to the general store and they found it easily enough, a solid building on Main Street with living quarters above. Before Catherine could dismount, a woman burst out the front door, heavily pregnant and crying. "Catherine! Oh, thank God!" Margaret rushed forward as best she could. "We were so worried. When you did not arrive and the storm came through, I thought the worst." Catherine slid from her horse and embraced her sister carefully, mindful of the baby. "I am fine. I found shelter." She turned and gestured to Owen, who had dismounted and stood holding both horses. "This is Owen Thorne. He saved my life." Margaret's eyes went wide as she took in Owen, then flickered between him and Catherine with sudden understanding. A man appeared in the doorway, tall and thin with spectacles, Margaret's husband Robert. "Come inside, all of you," Robert said. "You must be frozen and exhausted." They went inside the store and up to the warm living quarters above. Margaret fussed over Catherine while Robert took Owen aside to hear the story of the storm and rescue. Catherine watched Owen talk to her brother-in-law, saw Robert's expression grow thoughtful and approving. Margaret pulled Catherine into the kitchen, ostensibly to help with tea but really to interrogate her. "Tell me everything right now. That man is in love with you." "I could see it the moment he looked at you." Catherine felt her face heat. "It all happened so fast. I know you will think I am crazy. I think you are glowing." Margaret smiled, one hand on her swollen belly. "Tell me." So Catherine told her sister everything, about the 3 days in the cabin, about falling in love, about Owen's proposal and their plans. Margaret listened with growing delight, occasionally interjecting with questions or exclamations. "Catherine, this is wonderful," Margaret said when the story was finished. "I was so worried about you being alone, teaching in Fort Laramie with no prospects. But if this Owen Thorne is half as good as he seems, you have found something rare." "He is good, Margaret, the best man I have ever met." Catherine glanced toward the other room where she could hear Owen's deep voice talking with Robert. "But I have to finish my contract in Fort Laramie. We will be apart for months. Then you write to each other and visit when you can. Real love waits." Margaret hugged her sister. "I am so happy for you." They emerged from the kitchen with tea and sandwiches. Owen and Robert seemed to have struck up an easy rapport, discussing cattle ranching and the growth of Cheyenne. They all sat together and talked late into the evening, Catherine acutely aware of every moment passing, bringing closer the time when Owen would have to leave. Finally, Robert stood and stretched. "Owen, you are welcome to stay here tonight. We have a spare room and it is too late to ride back in the dark. I appreciate the offer, but I need to get back to check on the herd." Owen rose as well, his eyes finding Catherine. "But thank you for your hospitality." Catherine's heart sank. She had known he would have to leave, but not this soon, not tonight. She stood and followed Owen as he moved toward the door. Margaret and Robert discreetly retreated to give them privacy. Owen took both of Catherine's hands in his. "I will write to you at Fort Laramie as soon as I can. And I will visit when the weather clears and I can get time away. I will write, too, every day if the mail runs." Catherine blinked back tears. "I do not want you to go. I do not want to go either." Owen pulled her close, holding her tight. "But we both have responsibilities. This is just the first of many goodbyes and reunions. We will get through it." Catherine nodded against his chest, breathing him in one more time. Then she pulled back and looked up at him. "I love you, Owen Thorne. Ride safely." "I love you, Catherine Andrews. Stay safe until I see you again." Owen bent and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Then he was gone, out the door and down to his horse. Catherine stood in the window and watched him ride away into the darkness, her hand pressed to the glass. She felt Margaret come up beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. "He will be back," Margaret said softly. "Love like that does not let go." Catherine leaned into her sister and let herself cry, mourning the separation even as her heart sang with joy at having found Owen at all. The next 3 months were the longest of Catherine's life. She returned to Fort Laramie after spending a week with Margaret, resuming her teaching duties and throwing herself into work to keep from thinking too much about Owen. But every evening she would return to her small room in the boarding house and find herself staring at the door, hoping for a letter. Owen's first letter arrived 2 weeks after they parted. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it, seeing his careful handwriting for the first time. He wrote about the ranch, about checking the herd after the storm and finding most of the cattle safe. He wrote about how empty the cabin felt without her there. And he wrote about his love, words that made Catherine's heart soar even as tears ran down her face. She wrote back immediately, filling pages with details of her daily life, the children she taught, her students' progress. She wrote about missing him constantly, about dreaming of their future together. She poured her heart onto paper and mailed it with a prayer that it would reach him quickly. The letters came regularly after that, sometimes 2 a week when the mail ran well. Catherine learned the rhythms of Owen's life through his words. He wrote about working cattle, about the spring calving season beginning, about his progress saving money for their future ranch. He asked questions about her teaching, about her thoughts and dreams, and Catherine marveled at how well he listened even through written words. In March, Owen appeared at Fort Laramie without warning. Catherine was teaching arithmetic to her older students when there was a knock at the schoolhouse door. She opened it and there he stood, hat in hand, looking uncertain and hopeful. Catherine let out a small cry and threw herself into his arms, propriety forgotten. Her students erupted in giggles and whispers behind her. Owen caught her and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "Surprise," he murmured against her ear. Catherine laughed and cried at the same time. She pulled back and wiped her eyes, suddenly aware of her students watching with great interest. "Class, this is Mr. Thorne. He is a friend." "He is her beau," one of the older girls, Emma, announced with great authority. "You can tell by the way they are looking at each other." The children dissolved into laughter and Catherine felt her face flame. But Owen just grinned and nodded to the class. "Guilty as charged. I apologize for interrupting your studies." Catherine sent the children home early, claiming she needed to prepare lessons, which fooled no one. As soon as the last student left, she turned to Owen and he swept her into another embrace, kissing her soundly. "I missed you so much," Catherine said between kisses. "Your letters are wonderful, but they are not the same as having you here. I know. I could not stand being away any longer." Owen pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "I told the foreman I needed 3 days. I have to ride back tomorrow evening, but I wanted to see you, to make sure you are real and not just someone I dreamed up." They spent the afternoon walking through Fort Laramie, talking and holding hands when they thought no one was looking. Catherine introduced Owen to the other teachers and the post commander's wife, who had been kind to her. Everyone seemed charmed by Owen's quiet courtesy, and Catherine felt a swell of pride at having him by her side. That evening they had dinner at the boarding house where Catherine lived. The landlady, Mrs. Cooper, insisted Owen stay for the meal and subjected him to a thorough if friendly interrogation. Owen answered every question with patience and good humor, and by the end of the meal, Mrs. Cooper was smiling approvingly at Catherine. "You have found a good one, dear Mrs. Cooper said as she cleared plates. "Do not let him get away." "I do not intend to," Catherine replied, meeting Owen's eyes across the table. After dinner, they walked in the cold evening air, finding a bench near the parade grounds where they could sit and talk privately. Owen told Catherine about his progress on buying the land he wanted, about his plans for building a house and starting his own herd. Catherine talked about finishing out the school term, about her excitement and nervousness for their future. "I have been thinking," Owen said, taking her hand. "What if we married in June? Right after your contract ends. I know we talked about a longer engagement, but Catherine, I do not want to wait any more than necessary." Catherine's breath caught. "June? That is only 3 months away. Too soon." Owen looked worried. "I am sorry, I do not want to rush you." "No," Catherine squeezed his hand. "Not too soon at all. Yes, let us marry in June." Owen's face broke into a brilliant smile. He pulled her close and kissed her, sweet and tender. "You have made me the happiest man alive." They made plans late into the night, sitting close on the bench and talking about every detail. They would marry in Cheyenne with Margaret and Robert as witnesses. Owen would finish building a small house on his land by June. Catherine would move to Paso Robles, and they would start their life together. The next day passed too quickly. Owen spent the morning meeting Catherine's students, who were fascinated by the real cowboy in their classroom. He talked to them about working cattle and life on a ranch, and Catherine watched with love as he patiently answered every question. In the afternoon, they rode out of the fort a short distance to spend time alone, talking and holding each other, both dreading the coming separation. As the sun started to sink, Owen had to leave to make the ride back before full dark. Catherine walked him to his horse, fighting tears. 3 more months, Owen said, holding her close. "Then we will never have to say goodbye again." 3 months, Catherine repeated. "I can do anything for 3 months if you are waiting at the end of it." Owen kissed her one last time, long and deep, a promise of the future to come. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, turning back twice to wave before he disappeared from sight. Catherine stood watching until she could not see him anymore, then returned to her room and cried into her pillow, counting the days until June. The final months of her teaching contract crawled by with agonizing slowness. Catherine threw herself into her work and into preparing for her new life. She ordered fabric from the trading post and sewed new clothes for herself, practical things that would suit ranch life. She corresponded with Owen almost daily, their letters full of plans and declarations of love. And she visited Margaret twice more, helping her sister with the new baby, a healthy boy they named Thomas. "You are going to be wonderful together," Margaret said, watching Catherine hold baby Thomas with a wistful expression. "I cannot wait to see you as happy as I am." May finally arrived, and with it Catherine's last days of teaching. Her students threw her a farewell party, presenting her with a hand-drawn card signed by everyone. Catherine cried as she hugged each child goodbye, knowing she would miss them but eager to begin her new life. The day after the term ended, Catherine traveled to Cheyenne with the monthly supply wagon. Margaret and Robert welcomed her warmly, and the next morning Owen arrived, along with a man he introduced as his friend and fellow ranch hand, Samuel. "Samuel will stand up with me at the wedding," Owen explained. "If that is all right, of course." Catherine could barely look away from Owen. He was dressed in his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his beard shaped. He looked handsome and nervous and perfect. The wedding took place the following morning in the small church in Cheyenne. Catherine wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, with Margaret's wedding veil borrowed for the occasion. Margaret stood up with her, glowing with happiness for her sister. Robert and Samuel bore witness, and the pastor who served the growing town performed the ceremony. Catherine barely heard the words. She was too focused on Owen, on his gray eyes locked on hers, on his hands holding hers so carefully. When the pastor said they could kiss, Owen pulled her close and kissed her with such tenderness that Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you, Mrs. Thorne," Owen whispered against her lips. "I love you, Mr. Thorne," Catherine replied, joy bubbling up through her chest. They celebrated with a simple meal at Margaret and Robert's home. Then Owen and Catherine set out for Paso Robles. The ride took most of the afternoon, and Catherine felt her excitement growing with each mile. This was her wedding day, the beginning of her new life, and she could not stop smiling. Paso Robles turned out to be a tiny settlement, barely more than a dozen buildings, but it sat in a beautiful valley with mountains rising in the distance. Owen led Catherine past the town to a track that wound into the hills. After about 20 minutes, they crested a rise and Catherine gasped. Below them sat a small cabin, newly built with fresh lumber still golden in the sun. It was one room but well made, with a stone chimney already smoking gently. A barn and corral stood nearby, and beyond that was open grazing land stretching to the horizon. "Welcome home," Owen said softly. Catherine could not speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Owen helped her dismount, and they stood together looking at what he had built for them. It was not grand or fancy, but it was theirs, a place they could build a life. Owen swept Catherine into his arms and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing. He set her down gently in the middle of the cabin, and Catherine turned slowly, taking it all in. A bed in one corner with beautiful quilts, probably made by one of the ranch wives. A table and chairs. A cooking stove, shelves and hooks for storage, everything simple but made with care. "It is perfect," Catherine said. "Owen, it is absolutely perfect." Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "I wanted you to have a real home. Not just four walls, but a place where you can be happy." Catherine turned in his arms and looked up at him. "I am happy. Right here, right now, I am happier than I ever thought possible." They kissed, and the kiss deepened, all the longing and waiting and separation pouring into it. Owen lifted Catherine again and carried her to the bed. They made love as the sun set, tender and passionate, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words of love. Afterward they lay tangled together under the quilts, Catherine's head on Owen's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. The fire crackled softly, and outside evening birds sang. Catherine felt peace settle over her like a blessing. "I was so lost before I met you," she said quietly. After my parents died, I felt like I was just drifting, going through the motions of life without really living. Then that storm came and I found you, and suddenly everything made sense." Owen tightened his arms around her. "I felt the same. I thought I was content with my solitary life. Then you knocked on my door, half frozen and fierce and beautiful, and I realized how empty my life had been. You brought color to a gray world." Catherine propped herself up to look at him. "Promise me we will always talk to each other like this. That we will never let the everyday struggles make us forget why we fell in love. I promise." Owen pulled her down for a kiss. "I will remind you every day that you are the best thing that ever happened to me." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss. Catherine had been nervous about her wedding night, but with Owen everything felt natural and right. He was gentle and patient, making sure of her pleasure before his own, and Catherine fell even more in love with the man who had become her husband. The next weeks passed in blissful adjustment to married life. Catherine learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping Owen with the work of tending their small herd of cattle he had purchased with his savings. She cooked and cleaned and made the cabin into a true home. Owen taught her to ride better, and she taught him more advanced reading and arithmetic in the evenings by firelight. They fell into routines but never boring ones. Every day brought new challenges and new joys. Catherine discovered she loved ranch life, loved the physical work and the connection to the land and animals. Owen discovered he loved coming home to a wife who greeted him with kisses and laughter, who made even the hardest days bearable. In August, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be sure before telling Owen. She chose an evening when they were sitting outside watching the sunset, one of their favorite rituals. "Owen, I have something to tell you." Catherine took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Owen's eyes went wide. For a moment he just stared at her, then a smile spread across his face so brilliant it rivaled the setting sun. "A baby, truly, truly. Probably early March, the way I calculated." Catherine laughed as Owen let out a whoop and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We are having a baby." Owen set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be doing so much work?" "I am fine." "Pregnant women have babies all the time and most keep working until near the end." Catherine cupped his face. "But you can pamper me a little if you want." Owen did more than pamper her. He treated Catherine like she was made of glass, insisting she rest more and take on fewer chores. Catherine found it both endearing and frustrating, eventually having to sit him down and explain that she needed to feel useful. They compromised, with Owen taking on the heavier work and Catherine handling the household and lighter ranch tasks. As fall turned to winter and Catherine's belly grew, Owen became even more attentive. He talked to the baby constantly, his hand on Catherine's stomach, telling their child about the ranch and the life they would have. Catherine would watch him with overwhelming love, hardly believing this was her life. In December, they had their first real argument. A harsh early winter storm was coming, and Owen wanted to ride out to move some cattle to better shelter. Catherine, 6 months pregnant and worried, begged him not to go. "It is too dangerous," she said, near tears. "What if you get caught in the storm like I did? What if you do not come back?" "Catherine, I have to go. Those cattle are our livelihood. I cannot let them get caught in the wrong valley." Owen was pulling on his heavy coat, his expression stubborn. "Our livelihood does not matter if you are dead." Catherine's voice rose. "We will manage without some cattle. I cannot manage without you." Owen stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the way her hands clutched her swollen belly. He put down his coat and came to her, pulling her into his arms. "I am sorry," he said quietly. You are right. The cattle are not worth the risk. I will stay home and we will deal with whatever happens. Catherine sagged against him in relief. Thank you. I cannot lose you, Owen. I cannot raise this baby alone. You will not have to. I am not going anywhere. Owen held her tight, one hand rubbing her back soothingly. I promise to always come home to you. The storm passed, and they did lose a few head of cattle, but Owen did not regret his choice. His wife and coming child were more important than any animal. The incident taught them both to communicate their fears and needs, to work together rather than letting stubbornness divide them. Christmas came and Owen surprised Catherine with a rocking chair he had built himself, perfectly sized and sanded smooth. Catherine cried and laughed as she sat in it, rocking gently, imagining herself there with their baby. "It is perfect," she said for what felt like the 100th time. "You are perfect." Owen knelt beside the chair and kissed her belly. "We are going to have a good life, the three of us. I promise you that." Winter deepened, and Catherine grew larger and more uncomfortable. Owen was unfailingly patient and supportive, helping her when she could not reach her feet to put on boots, rubbing her aching back, holding her when pregnancy hormones made her cry for no reason. In early March, Catherine went into labor. Owen rode frantically to fetch the doctor from Paso Robles, while Catherine tried to stay calm, breathing through the contractions. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Harrison, arrived with his wife who served as midwife. The labor was long and difficult. Catherine had never experienced such pain, but Mrs. Harrison coached her through it while Owen held her hand and wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. When Catherine screamed from the pain, Owen looked ready to faint, but he never left her side. Finally, as dawn broke on a cold March morning, their son was born. Catherine held him for the first time, this tiny perfect creature with Owen's gray eyes and dark hair, and felt her heart expand beyond anything she thought possible. "He is beautiful," Owen whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "Catherine, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Catherine asked, unable to look away from her baby's face. "Oliver." Owen touched his son's tiny hand, marveling when the baby gripped his finger. "Oliver Thorne, a strong name for what will be a strong man." Oliver proved to be a good baby, though the adjustment to parenthood was not easy. Catherine was exhausted from nursing and lack of sleep. Owen tried to help but felt helpless in the face of his son's needs. They stumbled through the first weeks together, learning as they went, growing closer through the shared challenges. As Oliver grew, Catherine and Owen fell even more deeply in love. They watched their son reach each milestone with wonder. His first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over. Parenthood brought new stresses but also new joys, and through it all their love remained the foundation of their family. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Owen expanded their herd slowly but steadily, building their ranch into something truly successful. Catherine took on some of the bookkeeping and correspondence with buyers, her education proving invaluable. They worked as partners in everything, making decisions together, supporting each other through droughts and harsh winters and all the challenges of frontier life. When Oliver was 3, Catherine became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous about childbirth, though still not looking forward to it. Owen was even more protective than before, if that was possible, and little Oliver seemed to sense something was different, constantly patting his mother's belly and asking when his brother or sister would arrive. Their daughter Sarah was born in late autumn, a quick, easy birth compared to Oliver's. She came out screaming with a full head of blonde hair, nothing like either parent, and a personality that made itself known from day one. Catherine and Owen looked at each other over their daughter's head and laughed, already seeing the challenges ahead. "We are outnumbered now," Owen said, kissing Catherine's sweaty forehead. "2 against 2. We can handle it." Catherine held Sarah close. Oliver cuddled at her other side. "We can handle anything together." Life with 2 children was chaotic but wonderful. Oliver was a serious little boy who loved to follow his father around and learn about ranching. Sarah was loud and fierce and determined, keeping Catherine on her toes. Owen proved to be a patient and loving father, never too tired to play with his children or tell them stories before bed. One evening when Oliver was 6 and Sarah was 3, they all sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing with a wooden horse Owen had carved while Catherine and Owen sat in the rocking chair together, Catherine in Owen's lap despite being far too big for it. "Are you happy?" Owen asked quietly, his arms around her waist. Catherine leaned back against him and smiled. Deliriously. "Are you?" "More than I ever dreamed possible." Owen kissed her temple. "Do you ever think about that storm? About how everything could have been different sometimes? If the storm had been less severe, if I had found different shelter, if you had not been at the cabin?" Catherine turned to look at him. "Everything had to happen exactly as it did for us to find each other. Then I am grateful for that storm." Owen cupped her face. "It brought me everything I never knew I needed." They kissed, soft and sweet, the kind of kiss that came from years of marriage and deep, abiding love. Oliver made a disgusted sound and Sarah giggled, and Catherine and Owen broke apart laughing. The years continued to pass. Owen and Catherine grew their ranch into one of the most successful in the area. They added a larger house when the cabin got too cramped, though they kept the cabin as a storage building and sometimes slept there on special occasions, remembering the early days of their marriage. Oliver grew into a young man who loved ranching as much as his father, and Owen began teaching him everything about managing the land and cattle. Sarah remained fierce and independent, eventually deciding she wanted to be a teacher like her mother had been. Catherine worked with her daughter, teaching her and helping her prepare for the exam to get a teaching certificate. Margaret and Robert remained close despite the distance, visiting when they could and exchanging letters regularly. Thomas grew up alongside his cousins, and the families spent holidays together whenever possible. When Oliver was 18, he started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Anna. Catherine watched her son fall in love and remembered her own whirlwind romance, smiling at the familiar signs of young love. Sarah, at 15, declared she would never marry. She was going to be an independent woman and teach school forever. Catherine and Owen just smiled and did not argue, knowing she would figure things out in her own time. On a warm summer evening when they had been married nearly 20 years, Catherine and Owen rode out to a hill overlooking their land. They did this sometimes, just the two of them, taking time away from the ranch and their children to reconnect. They stood together looking at everything they had built. The house, the expanded barns, the healthy cattle grazing peacefully, the land they owned free and clear. Beyond that was Paso Robles, grown now into a real town with schools and churches and businesses. They had been part of that growth, contributing to the community and helping new families settle. "We did well," Owen said, his arm around Catherine's waist. "Better than I ever imagined." Catherine leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side after all these years. "We did, but do you know what I am most proud of?" "What?" "That I still love you as much as I did that first night in the cabin, more actually." Catherine turned to face him. 20 years and you still make my heart race." Owen smiled and pulled her close. 20 years and you still take my breath away. Every single day, Catherine, I thank God for that storm that brought you to my door. Best storm of my life." Catherine rose on her toes to kiss him. They stood there as the sun set, two people who had found each other in a blizzard and built a life full of love and purpose. Around them stretched the land they had tamed together, the home they had made, the family they had raised. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Owen and Catherine rode back to the house. Their children would be waiting, probably arguing about something, and there would be dinner to make and chores to finish and all the normal chaos of family life. But they faced it together, as they had faced everything for 20 years, and would continue to face whatever came for the rest of their lives. Partners and lovers and best friends, bound together by a love that had started in a snowstorm and would last until their final days. When they reached the house, Oliver came out to help with the horses. At 18, he was nearly as tall as Owen, broad-shouldered and strong. "Ma, Pa, Anna's family is here. They came for dinner and stayed." Catherine and Owen exchanged glances, both reading the excitement and nervousness in their son's face. They knew what was coming, had seen it building for months. Inside the house, they found Sarah entertaining their guests with a dramatic retelling of her day teaching the younger children their letters. Margaret and Robert had come for a visit as well, and the house was full of noise and laughter and love. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and everyone was sitting around talking, Oliver cleared his throat nervously. Anna sat beside him, her hand in his, both of them looking young and terrified and hopeful. "Pa, Ma, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, we have something to ask." Oliver's voice was steady despite his nerves. "Anna and I would like your permission to marry." Catherine felt Owen's hand find hers under the table. She looked at her son, so grown up, and felt tears prick her eyes. She glanced at Owen and saw the same emotion reflected in his face. "You have our blessing," Owen said, his voice thick. "Both of you. We would be honored to have Anna as part of our family." Anna's parents gave their blessing as well, and the room erupted in congratulations and excitement. Sarah complained loudly about being the only one left unmarried, which made everyone laugh. Margaret hugged Catherine, both sisters crying happy tears. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Catherine and Owen lay together in the darkness of their room. Oliver and Sarah were grown, or nearly so, starting their own lives. Soon it would be just the two of them again, coming full circle to where they started. "Are you ready to be grandparents?" Catherine asked, lightly tracing patterns on Owen's chest. "I suppose I have to be." Owen captured her hand and brought it to his lips. "Though I do not feel old enough, in my mind I am still 32, opening my cabin door to find a half-frozen, beautiful woman." Catherine smiled. "And I am still 23, thinking I was going to die in the snow before finding shelter with the most wonderful man in the world." "We have had a good life, Catherine, the best life." Catherine kissed him softly. "And it is not over yet. We have years ahead of us, grandchildren to spoil, the ranch to run." "More adventures together," Owen agreed. "I cannot wait." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had slept for 20 years, the way they would sleep for all the years to come. Oliver and Anna married that fall in a beautiful ceremony in the Paso Robles church. The whole community turned out to celebrate, and Catherine cried through the entire wedding. Her little boy was a man now, starting his own family, but she was not losing him. He and Anna would build a house on the ranch land, staying close, continuing the legacy she and Owen had started. True to her word, Sarah remained determined to teach and never marry, at least for now. She passed her certificate exam and got a position at the Paso Robles school, living at home and teaching the children of the families Catherine and Owen had known for years. A year after Oliver's wedding, Catherine held her first grandchild, a baby girl named Catherine after her grandmother. Catherine looked at the tiny baby and then at Oliver, seeing Owen in his face, seeing the continuation of their love in this new generation. "She is perfect," Catherine whispered. "Just like her grandmother," Owen said, standing behind her and looking down at his granddaughter with wonder. Life continued its steady rhythm. More grandchildren came, Oliver and Anna giving them 3 in total. Sarah eventually did fall in love, much to her own surprise, with a young lawyer who moved to Paso Robles from Denver. She married at 21 and continued teaching, proving you could have both a career and a family if you wanted it badly enough. The ranch prospered under Owen's continued management, and eventually Oliver's partnership. Catherine became a pillar of the Paso Robles community, known for her wisdom and kindness. She helped new mothers, taught children to read at the library, and was always ready with advice or a sympathetic ear. When Owen was 60 and Catherine was 51, they finally handed over full management of the ranch to Oliver. It was time, they both agreed, to slow down and enjoy their remaining years together. They traveled a little, something they had never done before, taking the train to San Francisco and seeing the ocean for the first time. They visited Margaret, now a grandmother herself, and spent time with old friends. But mostly they stayed home in Paso Robles, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, content with the life they had built. On a winter evening nearly 40 years after they first met, Catherine and Owen sat by the fire in their comfortable house. Snow was falling outside, not a dangerous blizzard but a gentle snowfall that covered the world in white beauty. "You remember the storm?" Catherine asked, watching the snow through the window. "Every detail." Owen reached for her hand, his fingers still strong despite the years. "The sound of you knocking on the door, how you looked half frozen and determined, the way you stole my heart without even trying. You saved my life that night. You saved mine." Owen pulled her close. "Before you I was just existing. You taught me how to truly live." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder. "We have been so fortunate, Owen, so blessed." "Yes, we have." Owen kissed the top of her head, "and I would not change a single moment except maybe I would have kissed you sooner." Catherine laughed. "We had only known each other 2 days when you told me you loved me. I think we moved quickly enough. Not quick enough. I should have kissed you the moment you walked through the door." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow and the fire, holding each other the way they had for 4 decades. Around them, the house settled with familiar creaks and groans. From down the hall came sounds of their grandchildren playing, visiting for the evening. The smell of dinner cooking drifted from the kitchen where Sarah was helping Anna prepare the meal. This was their life, built from a chance meeting in a blizzard. A life full of love and family and purpose. A life neither of them could have imagined but both were so grateful to have lived. As the snow continued to fall and the fire crackled warmly, Catherine and Owen held each other close. 2 souls who had found each other in a storm and created something beautiful together. Their love story had started with Catherine seeking shelter, and Owen giving her his bed while he slept by the fire. A simple act of kindness that had changed both their lives forever. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for, to find love when least expected, to build a life with purpose and meaning, and to grow old together knowing you made the right choice all those years ago in a small cabin during a Wyoming blizzard. Outside the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in white, and inside Catherine and Owen sat by the fire, still in love, still grateful, still together after all these years.